I never thought I'd find myself chasing after dinosaurs, but life has a funny way of surprising you. My name is Lawrence, and I'm a farmer in the Darling Downs, a peaceful farming region in southeast Queensland, Australia. The days are usually filled with the gentle sounds of wind rustling through the fields, the distant calls of birds, and the occasional mooing of cattle. But lately, something strange has been happening, something that has shaken the quiet of our little corner of the world. It started a few months ago. I was out in the early morning, checking on the cattle, when I heard a noise that I couldn't quite place. It was a strange sound, and it echoed across the fields. I stood there for a moment, listening, but the noise stopped as suddenly as it had started. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was just a crocodile in the nearby creek, or a koala making one of those strange noises they sometimes do. But the sound kept coming back, night after night, always at the same time. It was always the same, low, deep, and otherworldly. I started to get curious, and a bit uneasy. One night, I decided to investigate. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and my trusty dog, Dobby, I headed out into the darkness, following the sound. The night was calm. As I got closer, the sound grew louder, almost like it was coming from right under my feet. Dobby was acting strange too, his ears perked up and his tail stiff. He was scared, and to be honest, so was I. We walked for what felt like hours, deeper into the bush, until we reached a spot I hadn't visited in years. It was where the ground was rough and uneven, covered in thick bushes and tall grass. The sound was deafening now, a constant rumble. Then, the noise stopped. The silence that followed was almost worse than the sound itself. I stood there, flashlight in hand, trying to figure out what was going on. Dobby was whining softly, his nose to the ground, sniffing at something in the dirt. I knelt down beside him and saw it, an enormous footprint, pressed deep into the earth. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was about the size of a dinner plate, with 3 long toes and sharp claws at the end. My heart started racing. This wasn't from any animal I knew of. It looked almost prehistoric. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was happening. I went to the local pub, where all the farmers gathered for a drink after a long day's work. I told them about the noises and the footprint, half expecting them to laugh at me. But instead, they exchanged uneasy glances. "You're not the only one, Lawrence," said old Tom, a farmer who had lived in the area his whole life. "I've heard that sound too, and so have a few others around here. Some folks think it's just a big croc or a koala, but I'm not so sure. There are stories, old stories, about dinosaurs living out here in the bush." Dinosaurs? I thought he was joking, but the look on his face told me he was serious. "There's this creature they talk about, the Burrinjor," Tom continued. "Some say it's a living dinosaur, like an Australopithecus or something like that. Big, fast, and dangerous. There are also stories of another dinosaur, a Muttaburrasaurus, that some people think might still be out there hiding in the dense bush." I laughed nervously. Dinosaurs? It seemed impossible, but then again, that footprint, it didn't belong to any animal I knew. Could it really be that something from the distant past was still alive, lurking in the shadows of the Darling Downs? Over the next few weeks, the strange noises continued. More farmers started talking about them, and soon the whole town was buzzing with rumors of dinosaurs. Some people were excited, hoping it might bring tourists to the area, while others were scared, worried about what a creature like that could do if it came too close to their homes or livestock. One day, a group of cryptozoologists, a fancy word for people who study creatures that may or may not exist, came to town. They had heard the stories and wanted to investigate. They were a strange bunch, with their cameras, notebooks, and strange gadgets. They asked a lot of questions, took a lot of pictures, and even set up some traps in the bush, hoping to catch whatever was making those noises. I joined them on one of their expeditions, eager to get to the bottom of the mystery. We trekked deep into the bush, following the same path I had taken that night with Dobby. The cryptozoologists were excited, chattering about the possibility of discovering a living dinosaur. But as the hours passed and we found nothing but more footprints and strange noises, their excitement started to fade. We never did find the creature. The noises eventually stopped and the footprints disappeared. The cryptozoologists left, disappointed, but still convinced that something strange was out there. As for me, I'm still not sure what to believe. Maybe it was just a big croc or a koala, or maybe, just maybe, there's something more out there, hiding in the shadows, a remnant of a time long past. Every now and then, when I'm out in the fields late at night, I'll hear a faint rumble in the distance, and I'll remember those strange nights. I'll wonder if the Darling Downs still hold secrets, buried deep in the earth, waiting to be discovered. And who knows, maybe one day someone will find the proof we need, proof that dinosaurs still walk among us here in the heart of Australia. But until then, I'll keep my eyes and ears open, and I'll always be ready for the unexpected. Because out here in the bush, you never know what might be lurking just beyond the next bend. As a fisherman, the sea is both my home and my livelihood. I have spent countless hours under the sun, waiting patiently for a catch. The ocean is a place of wonder, full of mysteries that no man can fully understand. But of all the stories and legends that I've heard, there's one that has always fascinated me the most: the tale of the Fiji mermaid. My name is Winston, and I've been fishing off the coast of Fiji for as long as I can remember. I've seen all kinds of strange things in these waters. Fish that glow in the dark, creatures with colors so bright they seem to come from another world, and even dolphins that swim close to the boat as if they want to chat. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened one quiet afternoon in late September. It was a day like any other. The sky was clear and the water was calm. The other fishermen and I had set out early, hoping to catch enough fish to bring home a good haul. We were a small group, just me, my old friend Arnold, and a younger man named Eli who had recently joined us. We were in high spirits, joking around and enjoying the warm sun on our backs. As the day wore on, we found ourselves drifting further from shore. The fishing was slow, and the fish seemed to be hiding from us. Arnold suggested that we try a different spot, one that was deeper and less traveled by other fishermen. It was a risky move, but we were eager to bring home something special. We sailed for a few more hours, leaving the familiar coastline behind. The water here was darker, almost an inky blue, and the waves were gentler. The air was filled with the sound of seagulls crying out above us and the occasional splash of water against the boat. There was something different about this place, something almost eerie. Just as we were about to cast our lines, Eli let out a sudden shout. "Look, over there!" he cried, pointing to the water's surface. We all turned to see what had caught his attention. At first, I couldn't make out anything unusual. The water was still, and there were no signs of fish or any other sea creatures. But then, just as I was about to dismiss it as a false alarm, I saw it, a flash of something pale and shimmering beneath the surface. "Did you see that?" I asked the others, my voice low with excitement. Arnold nodded, his eyes wide. "What was that, a fish?" "I don't think so," Eli replied, his voice trembling slightly. It looked different. We all stared at the water, our hearts pounding with anticipation. Whatever it was, we were determined to find out what it was. We waited in silence, our eyes scanning the water for any sign of movement. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. Just as we were beginning to think that we had imagined the whole thing, the water began to ripple again. This time, it was closer to the boat. I leaned over the edge, trying to get a better look. And then I saw it, a face just below the surface. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. The eyes were large and dark, almost human-like, but the skin was pale and almost translucent, with a faint bluish tint. Long, flowing hair surrounded the face, drifting in the water like seaweed. My breath caught in my throat. "It's a mermaid," I whispered, hardly believing my own words. Arnold and Eli were speechless, their eyes fixed on the creature below. The mermaid, if that's what it was, seemed to be watching us, its gaze curious but cautious. It was as if it was trying to decide whether we were friend or foe. For a moment, everything was still. We stared at each other, man and mermaid, two creatures from different worlds brought together by chance. And then the mermaid was gone. It vanished into the depths of the ocean, leaving only a trail of bubbles in its wake. We were left in stunned silence, unable to process what we had just seen. Had we really just seen a mermaid? "We have to follow it," Eli said suddenly, breaking the silence. Arnold and I exchanged a look. We knew the risks. Following an unknown creature into deeper waters could be dangerous. But the curiosity was too strong, the pull of the unknown too tempting to resist. Without a word, we set off in the direction the mermaid had gone. The boat cut through the water, leaving a trail of white foam behind us. We searched for hours, our eyes never leaving the surface of the water, but the mermaid was nowhere to be found. It was as if it had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace of its existence. As the sun began to set, we were forced to admit defeat. We turned the boat around and headed back to shore, our minds still reeling from what we had seen. The journey back was quiet, each of us lost in our own thoughts. When we finally reached the shore, the other fishermen were waiting for us, eager to hear about our day. But when we told them what we had seen, they laughed it off, dismissing it as a tall tale or a trick of the light. "Mermaids don't exist," they said. "You must have been seeing things." But we knew what we had seen. The memory of that face beneath the water, those dark, curious eyes, would stay with me forever. The Fiji mermaid was real, I had no doubt about that. But it was elusive, a creature of the deep that only revealed itself to those who were willing to believe. My name is Ethan, and I want to tell you about something incredible that happened to me. I'm just a kid, but I'll never forget this day as long as I live. It all started when my dad and I went hiking in a national park. We often went hiking on weekends because Dad loved the outdoors. He said it was good for me too to get out of the house and breathe fresh air. So, on this particular Saturday, we packed our backpacks with snacks, water, and a map and set out for the woods. The weather was perfect, clear skies, cool breeze, and the sun shining through the trees. The trail we chose was one we hadn't been on before. It was supposed to lead to a beautiful viewpoint where you could see the entire valley below. I was excited because Dad said we might even spot some animals like deer, rabbits, or maybe even a fox. I loved animals, and the thought of seeing one in the wild made me walk a little faster. As we hiked, I noticed how tall the trees were. Some of them seemed to touch the sky. The leaves rustled gently in the wind, and every now and then we would hear a bird call or see a squirrel dart across the path. It was peaceful, and I felt happy being there with my dad. He was in front of me, checking the map and making sure we were going the right way. I stayed close behind, looking around and taking in all the sights and sounds of the forest. After we'd been walking for about an hour, we came to a part of the trail that went downhill. The path was a bit narrow, with bushes and tall grass on either side. I was careful not to trip over the roots that jutted out here and there. As we walked down the slope, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. It was just a quick movement, but it made me stop. I turned my head to the left, where the forest was thicker and darker. There, standing among the trees, was a figure. At first, I thought it was just a large tree or maybe a shadow, but as I looked closer, I realized it wasn't. It was something else, something I had never seen before. It was much taller than any person I had ever met, and it stood on two legs like a human, but it wasn't human. Its arms were long, almost reaching its knees, and its shoulders were broad. The creature's face was partly hidden by the shadows, but I could see its eyes, large and dark, staring right at me. I wanted to call out to my dad, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, staring at the creature. It didn't move either. It just stood there, watching me. I didn't feel scared, though. It was more like I was in awe, unable to believe what I was seeing. I had heard stories about creatures like this, creatures called sasquatch or Bigfoot, but I never thought they were real. Yet here it was, right in front of me. For a moment, everything else faded away. The sounds of the forest, the breeze, even my dad who was just a few steps ahead. It was like time had stopped, and it was just me and the Sasquatch, locked in this strange, silent moment. I don't know how long we stood there, but it felt like forever. I kept thinking, is this real? Am I really seeing this? Then the Sasquatch turned and walked away. It moved quietly, disappearing into the thick trees as if it had never been there. I watched it go, still too stunned to move or speak. When it was gone, I finally managed to turn around and saw my dad ahead of me, still walking down the trail, completely unaware of what I had just seen. I hurried to catch up with him, my heart still racing. I wanted to tell him what I had seen, but I didn't know how to explain it. Would he believe me? Or would he think I was just imagining things? I decided to keep it to myself for now. Maybe I would tell him later, when we were back at the campsite, and I had time to think about it more. As we continued our hike, I couldn't stop thinking about the Sasquatch. The rest of the day felt different, like I was in a dream. Even the beautiful viewpoint didn't seem as amazing as it normally would have. All I could picture was those dark eyes staring at me from the trees. Part of me wondered if I had really seen it, or if it was just a trick of the light, but deep down, I knew it was real. When we finally reached the end of our hike and headed back to the car, I kept glancing back at the forest, hoping to catch another glimpse of the creature. But it didn't appear again. The forest was just as peaceful and quiet as before, with no sign of anything unusual. It was like the Sasquatch had vanished completely. That night, as I lay in my sleeping bag, I replayed the moment over and over in my head. I could still see the creature so clearly, standing there among the trees. I wondered where it had gone and if anyone else had ever seen it. I felt a strange sense of connection to it, like I had shared something special with this mysterious creature of the forest. I never did tell my dad about the Sasquatch. I guess I was afraid he wouldn't believe me, or that he would laugh and say it was just my imagination. But I knew what I had seen, and that was enough for me. Stargazing has always been a beloved pastime for me and my friends. On clear nights, we often gather at a small hill just outside our town. The hill offers an unobstructed view of the sky, far from the city lights that blur the stars. We bring blankets and snacks, settle down, and lose ourselves in the vastness of the universe. That night was no different, or so we thought. The stars were brighter than usual. We could even see the Milky Way, a faint ribbon of light stretching across the sky. It was one of those perfect nights where everything felt peaceful, and the only sounds were the crickets in the grass and the occasional rustling of leaves in the trees. As we lay on our backs, gazing up at the twinkling lights above, something strange happened. At first, it was just a shadow, barely noticeable against the dark sky. But as we continued to watch, the shadow grew larger. It was as if a cloud had drifted across the stars, but there were no clouds in the sky that night. The shadow moved smoothly, almost as if it were alive. The others must have noticed it too, because there was a sudden tension in the air, a sense that something was not quite right. The shadow seemed to come closer, and as it did, I began to make out a shape. It wasn't a cloud. It was something else, something much stranger. It had wings, large and dark, and they flapped silently as it moved through the sky. The shape was unlike any bird I had ever seen. It was much larger, with wings that stretched out wide, casting an eerie shadow over the ground. As the creature drew nearer, we could see it more clearly. It was covered in dark, spotted patterns that seemed to shift and change as it moved. Its wings were massive, with a span that must have been at least 10 feet across. But it was its eyes that were the most unsettling. They glowed a bright red, like two burning coals in the darkness. The eyes seemed to pierce through the night, watching us intently as we lay frozen on the ground. There was something almost hypnotic about those eyes. They were mesmerizing and terrifying all at once. I couldn't look away, even though every instinct told me to run. It felt as though the creature was aware of us, aware of our fear, and it was feeding off it. The creature circled above us, its wings barely making a sound as they cut through the air. It moved with a grace that was both beautiful and frightening, like a predator stalking its prey. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the blood rushing in my ears. My mind was racing, trying to understand what I was seeing, but there was no explanation that made sense. We had all heard stories of strange creatures in the night, tales of monsters and spirits that haunted the woods and the skies. But those were just stories, told around campfires to spook each other. This was real. The creature above us was real, and it was unlike anything I had ever imagined. As it hovered above us, I noticed something else. There was a faint hum in the air, a low, vibrating sound that seemed to come from the creature itself. It was almost like a whisper, just on the edge of hearing. The sound was unnerving, like a warning or a threat. It sent chills down my spine, making the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The creature continued to circle above us, its red eyes glowing in the darkness. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was studying us, trying to decide what to do next. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. I could hardly breathe, and I knew the others felt the same. No one moved. No one spoke. We were all too terrified to do anything but watch. I was walking through the woods one evening, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon. The sky turned from bright blue to a soft orange, and shadows stretched long across the path. The trees stood tall and silent, their leaves rustling gently in the cool breeze. As I walked, I noticed something strange. Ahead of me, a soft white mist began to rise from the ground. It moved slowly, almost like it was alive. The air around me grew colder. I couldn't explain why, but something told me to keep going. As I got closer, the mist started to take shape. It wasn't just a cloud or fog. It was something more. It formed the figure of a woman, dressed in a long, flowing robe. Her face was hidden beneath a hood, and her hands were clasped in front of her as if she were praying. She seemed to glide over the ground, her feet never touching the earth. I knew then that she was a ghost. My heart pounded in my chest, but I couldn't look away. There was something peaceful about her, something sad and lonely. She didn't seem to notice me. Instead, she moved slowly through the trees, as if she were searching for something or someone. I followed her, keeping my distance. The woods were quiet, except for the soft rustle of leaves and the faint sound of her robe brushing against the ground. The sun had nearly set, and the light was fading fast, but the ghostly figure seemed to glow with a faint, silvery light. As we moved deeper into the woods, I saw an old, crumbling chapel hidden among the trees. The ghost of the nun floated toward it, her movements slow and deliberate. She paused at the entrance, her head bowed as if she were in prayer. Then, she began to fade. The mist that had formed her body dissolved into the air, leaving nothing behind. I stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where she had disappeared. The woods were dark now, and the night was closing in around me. I knew it was time to leave, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the ghost of the nun was still there, watching over the old chapel, searching for something she had lost long ago.